The search for true spiritual growth has become increasingly complex in our modern world, where countless paths promise enlightenment, yet often leave seekers feeling more confused than enlightened, more fragmented than whole, and more bound by their limitations than free to transcend them. Sri Aurobindo's profound teachings emerge as a beacon of clarity amidst this confusion, offering not merely another set of techniques or philosophies to accumulate, but a comprehensive roadmap for conscious evolution that addresses the fundamental question of what it means to grow spiritually in ways that create lasting transformation rather than temporary spiritual highs or superficial changes that dissolve under the pressures of daily existence. His vision recognizes that authentic spiritual development isn't about escaping human limitations, but about evolving beyond them through conscious participation in the intelligence that governs all life and seeks ever greater expressions of consciousness, creativity, and compassionate wisdom through the vehicle of individual human experience. The genius of Sri Aurobindo's approach lies in its recognition that spiritual growth must be evolutionary rather than merely transcendent, integrating rather than rejecting the full spectrum of human experience whilst transforming it, through the awakening of higher capacities of awareness that can embrace complexity without being overwhelmed, engage with challenge without being defeated, and express love without being diminished by difficulty or disappointment. This evolutionary spirituality acknowledges that we are not broken beings seeking to return to some original, perfect state, but rather expressions of cosmic consciousness, learning to recognize and manifest our inherent divine nature through the very conditions and relationships that seem to limit us, transforming these apparent obstacles into stepping stones for developing qualities and capacities that couldn't emerge in any other way. The roadmap that emerges from his teachings doesn't promise a predetermined path that all seekers must follow identically, but rather reveals universal principles of consciousness evolution that can be applied uniquely through each person's individual circumstances, talents, and calling in ways that honor both personal authenticity and collective contribution to humanity's spiritual awakening. At the heart of this roadmap lies the understanding that true spiritual growth occurs through the gradual integration of what he called the three fundamental aspects of yoga: the path of knowledge that awakens us to our essential nature, the path of devotion that opens our hearts to divine love, and the path of works that transforms our actions into conscious service to the evolutionary intelligence that seeks to express itself through human activity and creativity. This integrated approach addresses one of the most significant challenges facing contemporary spiritual seekers: the tendency to compartmentalize spiritual development as something separate from ordinary life, responsibilities, and relationships, creating internal conflict between our aspirations for transcendence and our need to function effectively in family, community, and professional contexts. Sri Aurobindo's vision dissolves this artificial separation by revealing how every aspect of human experience can become a venue for spiritual practice when approached with conscious intention and receptive awareness. The morning routine becomes an opportunity for establishing inner equilibrium and clear purpose. Challenging relationships become laboratories for developing patience, understanding, and unconditional love. Professional responsibilities become avenues for expressing creativity, skill, and service to collective well-being. Even periods of rest and recreation become occasions for celebrating the beauty and abundance that characterize existence when perceived from expanded awareness. The evolution beyond limitations that this roadmap facilitates doesn't occur through denying or suppressing human nature, but rather through transforming it from within, by awakening to the deeper consciousness that exists as our most fundamental identity, what Sri Aurobindo called the psychic being or soul consciousness. that knows our authentic purpose and can guide all our choices and responses. From wisdom rather than fear, from love rather than need, from creative intelligence rather than habitual reactivity. This inner awakening naturally dissolves many of the psychological and emotional patterns that create the sense of limitation, revealing that what we thought were fixed aspects of our personality are actually temporary formations that can be transformed through patient practice and sincere aspiration for growth. Perhaps most importantly, this approach recognizes that individual spiritual evolution and collective transformation are not separate processes, but complementary aspects of the same evolutionary movement toward greater consciousness and cooperative intelligence throughout human civilization. As we learn to operate from our deeper spiritual nature, rather than surface personality patterns, we naturally begin to contribute to the emergence of more conscious forms of human organization, relationship, and creative expression that serve life's highest possibilities, rather than merely perpetuating cycles of competition, exploitation, and unconscious reaction to challenging circumstances. The practical application of this evolutionary vision begins with what might be called conscious living, the commitment to bringing awareness and intentionality to whatever activities and relationships comprise our current existence, rather than waiting for ideal conditions or perfect understanding before beginning the work of transformation. This conscious engagement with ordinary experience gradually reveals the extraordinary depth and potential that exists within apparently mundane situations, when met with receptive attention and sincere desire to learn and grow through whatever life presents as curriculum for our continued development. The roadmap for spiritual evolution that Sri Aurobindo provides becomes most practical when we understand that growing beyond limitations doesn't require dramatic external changes or the acquisition of supernatural abilities, but rather the gradual development of what he called spiritual consciousness, a quality of awareness that can perceive the divine intelligence operating through all circumstances whilst maintaining the discrimination needed to respond appropriately to complex situations without being overwhelmed by their complexity or discouraged by their apparent difficulty. This spiritual consciousness emerges through the patient cultivation of inner stillness that can observe thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them, combined with active engagement in life that expresses our deepest values and authentic purpose, rather than merely fulfilling social expectations or pursuing goals based on fear or desire for security and recognition. The transformation of limitations into opportunities for growth becomes evident as we learn to approach challenges as invitations to develop capacities we didn't know we possessed, rather than as evidence of our inadequacy or the world's hostility to our happiness and success. The relationship conflict that once triggered automatic defensive reactions becomes a chance to practice genuine communication and creative problem solving. The financial pressure that previously created anxiety and desperation becomes an opportunity to explore our relationship with security and discover resources of creativity and resilience that weren't accessible when we operated from fear and scarcity-based thinking. The health challenge that seemed like meaningless suffering becomes a gateway to understanding the mysterious relationship between consciousness and physical well-being, often revealing healing possibilities that emerge through approaches that address the whole person rather than merely treating symptoms. This evolution beyond limitations extends into our capacity for love and service, transforming relationships from venues for meeting personal needs through others into opportunities for mutual support in spiritual growth and authentic self-expression. The parent caring for children discovers that conscious attention to their developmental needs becomes a form of devotional practice that deepens understanding of unconditional love whilst developing patience, creativity, and skillful guidance that serves the children's authentic, unfolding rather than imposing adult expectations and anxieties upon their natural learning process. The friend offering support during difficult times learns that genuine care emerges not from trying to fix others' problems, but from providing presence and understanding that creates space for their own inner wisdom and strength to emerge and guide them through challenging transitions. The professional dimension of this evolution reveals how work can become a vehicle for expressing our unique gifts and contributing meaningfully to collective well-being, rather than merely surviving economically or achieving status and recognition through career advancement. When approached from spiritual consciousness, even routine tasks take on deeper significance as opportunities to practice excellence, cooperation, and service to purposes larger than personal advancement or financial accumulation. The quality of presence and authentic care that develops through spiritual practice naturally enhances our effectiveness in all professional contexts, whilst creating more harmonious and productive working relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to meaningful outcomes. Perhaps most remarkably, this roadmap reveals that the spiritual growth we seek doesn't require us to become someone different from who we already are, but rather to discover and express more completely the authentic nature that exists beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and limitation that have accumulated through personal history and social programming. This authentic self, the psychic being that Sri Aurobindo describes, possesses all the wisdom, love, and creative intelligence needed to navigate any situation with grace and effectiveness. But this inner resource often remains hidden beneath habitual patterns of thinking and responding that developed when we believed ourselves to be separate, vulnerable beings in an indifferent or hostile universe. The evolution beyond these limiting beliefs occurs gradually through experiences that demonstrate the reality of our deeper nature and its capacity to transform apparent obstacles into opportunities for growth and service. The moment when we remain calm during a crisis and discover previously unknown reserves of clarity and strength. The instance when we respond to hostility with understanding and watch conflict dissolve into mutual respect and cooperation. The occasion when we trust our intuitive guidance despite rational doubts and find that unexpected possibilities open that serve everyone involved more completely than our original plans could have achieved. These breakthrough experiences accumulate over time, creating confidence in our spiritual nature and willingness to approach increasingly challenging situations from consciousness rather than conditioning. The collective implications of this individual evolution become apparent as we recognize that every person who learns to operate from spiritual consciousness rather than ego-driven reactivity contributes to the gradual transformation of human civilization toward forms that support rather than obstruct the flowering of human potential and collaborative creativity. The family that operates from conscious love rather than unconscious patterns creates an environment where children naturally develop emotional intelligence, authentic self-expression, and capacity for genuine care for others' well-being. The community that includes individuals committed to spiritual growth gradually shifts toward values and decision-making processes that consider long-term consequences and collective flourishing rather than short-term advantage for particular groups or interests. This understanding dissolves the artificial boundary between personal, spiritual development and social responsibility, revealing that the most effective contribution we can make to addressing collective challenges, whether environmental crisis, economic inequality, political polarization, or cultural fragmentation, is the inner work that enables us to respond from wisdom rather than fear, from love rather than hatred, and from creative intelligence rather than defensive reactivity. When confronted with complex problems that require new approaches and unprecedented levels of cooperation across traditional boundaries and differences, What moves me most deeply about sharing this roadmap for spiritual evolution is recognizing that everyone who feels called to grow beyond their current limitations is already responding to the evolutionary intelligence that seeks to express greater consciousness, compassion, and creativity through human experience. If you've been searching for authentic spiritual growth that creates lasting transformation rather than temporary inspiration, if you can sense that your soul is calling you toward possibilities that transcend your current understanding of what's achievable, then you're already walking the path that Sri Aurobindo mapped with such clarity and wisdom. This isn't just another spiritual teaching competing for your attention. It's a comprehensive vision of human potential that can guide your unique journey of conscious evolution, whilst connecting you with others who share similar aspirations for growth and service. I'd be deeply honored if you'd join our community of fellow travelers by subscribing to our channel. But what touches my heart even more is knowing that your sincere commitment to spiritual growth contributes to humanity's collective awakening to its divine nature and evolutionary destiny. What limitations have you been most eager to transcend through spiritual development? And where have you glimpsed the greater possibilities that become available when we learn to operate from our deeper spiritual nature, rather than surface personality patterns and social conditioning? The ultimate destination of the roadmap that Sri Aurobindo provides is not a final state of perfection or completion, but rather the establishment of what he called life divine, a way of existing that remains perpetually open to greater possibilities, whilst expressing divinity through the beautiful complexity and creative challenge of embodied existence in time and space. This represents the mature fruit of spiritual evolution, not the transcendence of human nature, but its complete transformation into a transparent vehicle for expressing the intelligence, love, and creative power that govern and sustain all existence. The being who has traveled far along this roadmap discovers that limitations, rather than disappearing entirely, become creative parameters within which consciousness explores ever new forms of expression and service, much as a skilled artist uses the apparent constraints of particular materials and techniques to create beauty that couldn't emerge without these very limitations, providing structure and focus for infinite creative potential. This mature understanding dissolves the spiritual ambition that often drives early seekers, the desire to achieve particular states, acquire special powers, or demonstrate attainments that set us apart from ordinary humanity. Instead, there emerges what might be called effortless excellence, the natural expression of consciousness that has learned to operate without internal conflict or resistance to life's natural rhythms and requirements. This doesn't mean passive acceptance of harmful situations or unjust conditions, but rather response that emerges from deep understanding of what serves life's highest evolution and what perpetuates cycles of unconsciousness and suffering. Action becomes increasingly skillful and effective precisely because it's no longer driven by personal agendas or reactive emotions, but flows from alignment with the evolutionary intelligence that can perceive connections and possibilities invisible to purely individual perspective. The social and cultural implications of this transformation extend far beyond what we might initially imagine, creating ripple effects that influence every relationship and community that such evolved beings participate in. Children growing up around individuals who embody this integrated consciousness naturally develop greater emotional resilience, creative problem-solving abilities, and capacity for authentic self-expression, because they experience firsthand what human beings become when they learn to express their divine nature through their human circumstances. Communities that include members who operate from this evolved consciousness gradually shift toward collaborative decision-making, resource sharing, and conflict resolution approaches that serve everyone's authentic needs, rather than compromising between competing demands based on scarcity and fear. Perhaps most significantly, this evolution beyond personal limitations reveals the cosmic dimension of individual spiritual development. The recognition that consciousness evolution through human experience serves purposes that extend far beyond personal happiness or even human welfare to encompass the ongoing evolution of life itself on Earth and throughout the universe. Each person who successfully navigates the roadmap toward divine life becomes a conscious participant in this vast evolutionary adventure, contributing their unique perspectives and capabilities to the gradual emergence of forms of life and consciousness that have never existed before in the history of creation. This understanding brings tremendous meaning and purpose to even the most ordinary activities and relationships, revealing them as opportunities to serve the ultimate creative intelligence that manifests as galaxies, ecosystems, and human communities with equal intimacy and care. The practical implications of reaching this level of spiritual maturity manifest through what Sri Aurobindo called Gnostic action, engagement with life that emerges from direct knowing rather than mental analysis, spontaneous wisdom rather than learned responses, and effortless love rather than emotional effort or moral obligation. Decisions made from this consciousness carry a quality of rightness and effectiveness that serves multiple levels of need simultaneously: individual, relational, communal, and evolutionary, because they emerge from awareness that can perceive the interconnections and long-term consequences that remain invisible to more limited perspectives. This creates the kind of leadership and service that humanity desperately needs during periods of rapid change and increasing complexity. The roadmap that Sri Aurobindo provides ultimately reveals that the spiritual growth we seek is not an optional enhancement to ordinary human life, but rather the next, necessary stage in consciousness evolution that must emerge if humanity is to successfully navigate current challenges and fulfill its potential as a conscious species capable of creating civilization that serves rather than exploits the natural world and supports rather than oppresses the creative expression of individual and collective human potential. Every person who commits seriously to following this roadmap becomes a pioneer of this evolutionary transformation, demonstrating through their own development what becomes possible when human beings learn to embody their divine nature whilst remaining fully engaged with the practical challenges and creative opportunities of contemporary existence. The beauty of this vision lies in its recognition that the roadmap, whilst universal in its basic principles, must be traveled uniquely by each individual according to their particular circumstances, talents, and calling. There is no standardized program or predetermined timeline, but rather a living relationship with evolutionary intelligence that guides each person's development according to what serves their authentic growth and their unique contribution to collective awakening. This makes the journey endlessly creative and personally meaningful, whilst connecting each traveler with the vast community of souls who are engaged in the same fundamental work of conscious evolution and divine manifestation through human experience. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration into Sri Aurobindo's roadmap for evolving beyond limitations, my heart overflows with profound appreciation for every soul who recognizes that true spiritual growth is not a luxury for those who have solved all their practical problems, but rather the most essential work available to anyone who wishes to live with authentic effectiveness, emotional resilience, and meaningful contribution during these times of unprecedented challenge and opportunity for human consciousness and civilization. If these insights about conscious evolution and divine life have stirred something deep within your own spiritual seeking, if you can sense that your limitations are not permanent obstacles but rather temporary boundaries that can be transformed through sincere commitment to growth and service, then you're already embarking on the journey that Sri Aurobindo mapped with such clarity and compassion. I would be deeply moved if you'd continue this exploration with us by subscribing to our channel. But what inspires me most is hearing about your own experiences of growing beyond limitations that once seemed insurmountable. What aspects of spiritual growth have proven most transformative in your own journey of conscious evolution? How have you discovered ways to transform apparent limitations into opportunities for developing greater wisdom, love, and creative capacity? What glimpses of your own divine nature have shown you possibilities that transcend your previous understanding of human potential? Please share your stories, insights, and questions in the comments below. Your journey of evolving beyond limitations illuminates possibilities for all of us who are learning that spiritual growth is not about becoming someone different from who we are, but about discovering and expressing more completely the infinite consciousness that we have always been, waiting to recognize itself and manifest its creative potential through the unique and beautiful circumstances of our individual human existence in service to the ongoing evolution of love, wisdom, and conscious cooperation throughout our world.